So Cameron Krebs is a fifth generation livestock producer from Eastern Oregon, where he raises sheep, beef, wheat, and hay with his wife, Erin, and parents, Clint and Maureen Krebs. Cameron is passionate about producing healthy, ethically raised beef and lamb, and tirelessly works to find innovative ways to produce protein for Americans that result in both economic and environmental wins. Cameron's management strategy is to care for his employees, animals, and environment, so together they can care for their community, country, and planet. He holds a BS from Oregon State University. Thanks for being with us today, Cameron. It's all yours.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Todd. Todd has a fantastic voice for calling out those polls, so we'll see how he can use it here in a few minutes. Today, we're going to talk about predator management, and my presentation is Rethinking Livestock Management on a Predator-Filled Landscape. Before we jump in today, some of my objectives is to encourage you guys to post your questions into the chat, although I'm not sure I have it on my screen right now. We'll definitely circle back to them. Also, if there's anything you want to see in my presentation, feel free to print screen for your own tools later on. My goal is to give you guys some management tools to help you on your own personal landscapes across northern, western Colorado, I guess. So before we get started, though, I want to be very, very clear. I am not a biologist, I'm not a wolf advocate, and I'm not a hunter. What I am is I'm a rancher. As it said in my bio, I support a balanced ecosystem and I support multi-use public lands. I jumped in there at the end to listen to the outcome-based grazing. It was fantastic. So thank you to George and Hunter for leading that presentation there. And lastly, I'm a father. So on the right-hand corner there, there's my sixth generation at shearing just a couple days ago. So, but I want to know about you guys. So Todd put together a poll and I want to launch that right now if we can, Todd. I want to know who's in the group today. I see there's 115 presenters. So Todd, if you can go ahead and put that up. Guys, if you could please select the one that represents you, that'd be fantastic.
And I'll note here, Cameron, that this is actually multi-choice. So if you are, maybe you work for the government and also consider yourself a rancher, or maybe you're a rancher and a hunter, if more than one of these applies to you, click them both.
Thank you, Todd.
Looks like the numbers are coming in here quite well. We've got about 75 people have responded, but I'm going to close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
Thank you, Todd. As I suspected, cattle ranchers dominating the group, which is normal, and I'm pleased to see 6 fellow sheep herders. So thank you for joining in here today. The presentation today is going to focus in on our sheep allotment, which has the highest concentration of predators, and our practices. And at the end, there's 2 sections. There's a kind of an innovative approach for management of predators. And then the latter part of the presentation is going to be directed specifically to the cattle side of our operation and tools that hopefully fellow cattle producers can use on your own landscapes out there. So I'm going to close this and jump right into the next thing here. Oh, hang on. I got another box popped up here. There we go. I can see the chat now. Oops. All right. So I think George said he was a 3rd generation. I'm a 5th generation. Krebs Livestock's the name of our company. We're located in Cecil, Oregon as our headquarters. We run our sheep and cattle across 5 counties along the northeastern Oregon border. I'll show you a map here in a minute. If you're familiar with Oregon, kind of give you guys a perspective, the Columbia Basin is where we winter our livestock. It's big agricultural country, lots of irrigated farm, high intensity potatoes is the predominant crop grown in the area. And then we move the livestock back and forth between the winter and summer pastures. The cows go onto a private grassland up in northeastern Oregon called the Zumwalt Prairie. And then the sheep go to a Forest Service allotment on Tollgate. This is a map of Oregon to build a base of kind of where we operate and why this is important to us from a management of predators. The winter is where our lambing barn is at and our spring grazing, and which is we're lambing right now. And these blue polygons that dot the northeastern part of Oregon are known wolf packs. And how those polygons are drawn by the state of Oregon is collared data from wolves on their outer boundary range. So the darker the blue, the heavier concentration of wolves. And as you can see, the sheep are in the Blue Mountains there with a heavy concentration right in this area of a wolf pack. And the cattle are on the breaks of the Snake River with another heavy concentration of a wolf pack in that area. So very prevalent all summer long is a challenge we face managing through wolves. And we're going to focus on wolves predominantly because the techniques work for most predators. Wolves obviously are very passionate and a hot topic in Colorado right now, as you guys, I believe, recently passed a measure to reintroduce wolves. This is a zoomed in area of our summer sheep allotment, and the allotment runs right in here on the green line. The left polygon in black is what they call the Ruckle Ridge pack. The blue polygon on the right is a new pack that was just established in the 2020 grazing season, and they actually denned right in this area, if you guys can see that, to clog up your map a little bit. The point of this is to highlight the fact that it's heavily concentrated wolf presence every day of the week, every day while we're on the summer allotments. But before we go into talking about where we got today in the tools we utilize to manage our sheep, I want to talk about the history of predators as it relates to Krebs livestock and as it relates to the greater livestock industry. So we were established in 1913 as a sheep outfit, and we've continued to use sheep herders, which is the oldest non-lethal method dating back, as you guys all know. But in 1913, we had great public policy and great wildlife services. They had poison, and wildlife services effectively eradicated a whole species out of the lower 48, which is pretty phenomenal if we think about it. But when we think about that kind of approach, it was easy to understand that predators, sharp tooth, kill. But what happened, if we look at the past 100 years, is with the Endangered Species Act in 1973, Wildlife Services approach, because of off-target consequences, started changing. And there's a clear delay in our outfit's implementation of non-lethal deterrence, which is what NLD stands for. And it happens to be about 10 years after public policy. So 1973, Endangered Species Act came into effect. Wildlife Services changed their approach to predator management. 10 years later, the first guard dogs were introduced and started to be a part of our operation in the 80s. That continued to be developed all the way into today, where we run a fair number of guard dogs and different breeds, as they're still very effective. But if we go into the 90s, Oregon, being a very blue leaning state, outlawed hunting of bears and cougars with dogs. That was in the 90s. And in about 10-year lag on that, we see a massive increase of that population on our landscape. And those changes in public policies have continued to challenge us and has led to our early adoption of night pinning in 2009. And today, at the very end there, we use a whole gamut of tools on the landscape, which I'm going to talk about here, to try to protect the livestock from predators. So predator management for me was a paradigm shift, and it's a mindset that we cannot do it like Grandpa did. He had tools and resources that we don't have access to today, but in the same thing, we have access to tools that Grandpa could only dream about. For example, Zoom technology, as we're sitting here today. And the last thing about the actions that we took on our outfit is that we only have full control over what I do and how I respond. So controlling my own actions is the driving force here, because we have no control over how the predators act on the landscape. To get started, this is an aerial photo of our allotment. I'm going to moving fast. I'm going to jump right into tools here. I want you guys to be able to go out and utilize this as soon as possible or when you need it. What I really want to highlight in this photo is we operate in our Forest Service allotment. It's dense timber with these small open clearings. And so I call this night penning and camp placement theory. And it's basically basic military theory. We want the high ground. We want the predator to attack going uphill. And then we want to create the most visible space between the tree line and the sheep so that our techniques and tools can effectively protect the livestock at night. So we deploy the pins. The camp is in the corner right here. You just can't see it off picture. These are the polywoven wire fences that run in a square here. And the sheep become so used to them that they put themselves to bed every night. What's important about this picture is you can see that there is about 25 yards, 30 yards of distance to the tree line here around this pen. This happens to be one of our better campsites. Some of them, as you guys know, on your landscapes, you don't get this much open clearing to establish a defendable space, but we look for these as we develop our allotment and work with the Forest Service to establish these areas of night pinning. And the photo is a project I did with American Wool Council. I just want to make sure I give them credit here. The important thing about these night pins is the zoomed in image right at dusk. And what we try to look for is in these night pins is we want the guard dogs to be in a balanced approach between inside the pen and outside the pen. Our guard dog theory is we want 2 sentry animals and 3 or 4 tanks. So what we utilize is a mix of Akbosh and Pyrenees. Akbosh hit the target, Pyrenees come to support them. And you can see that we just naturally got a few dogs on the outside here. And there is some dogs in the photo, although I haven't been able to identify them yet. It's random if you've been around stock dog, guardian dogs, it's where they choose, but it just happens to go down every night like that. Again, if you zoom in, this is a closer picture here. The sheep in the kraal had already put themselves to bed, and we, because we were doing a little photo shoot, we restaged it and brought the sheep back into the photo here. They're looping around and to come into the night pen at night there. That's myself and the herder. Again, you can see that defendable space, and the camp is back here on the right. Defendable space to the tree line, and we're on top of a ridge here. So it's really important from a standpoint is to understand that these night pens, we've been using them since 2009, and they're really effective at protecting the stock from predation. When we start layering tools, which is what we're looking at here, is when we continue to increase the effectiveness of reducing predation on our landscape and with our animals. If you're not familiar with these 2 devices, those are Fox lights. In this particular setting on the left, in this picture here, the herder was in spring range and the predator was coyotes. What was happening, they were coming onto the fence at night on the far side of his camp and harassing the sheep. So he deployed his Fox light into this spring range, which is open grasslands, to aid in hazing the coyotes away and reduce stress on the animals that were on the inside of the polywoven wire fence there. The picture on the night, this was deployed on the right. This was deployed in the mountains. We utilize these in a random pattern, specifically for wolf deterrent. So if we move into a new campsite, we may deploy them for 2 days, take them down for 2 days, redeploy them for 2 days, move them around on the different parts of the pens, and I let the herders decide how and when they deploy them. The goal is to continue to project a different image to the predator's eye every night. If he comes to inspect the pen, the light looks different, and we want to just get him to think that the risk reward take for attack is enough that he comes back the next night. But one of the really big things that we have learned about night penning is that night penning isn't about, it's about inventory management. And we know we all know that when inventory management is focused on, there's increased profitability in our management, or increased profitability on in our operations. So our herders count the sheep at least once, sometimes twice a day, utilizing the night pens. The second thing that's important about this photo, which is us counting sheep, it's for, as a manager, we can count the sheep before we move camp. If we have any stray or missing livestock, that's increased predation risk to those animals. We know immediately when they strayed, what area they strayed in, and we can deploy resources to gather those stray animals before they're predated. If you look in this picture, this is a fence charger, electric fence charger. This is not to keep the sheep into the pen. It's to keep the predators out. One of our herders comes to me, says I switched him out, and he said the charger wasn't working. We'd had it for 2.5 years. I take it into the farm store. The particular charger's battery hadn't even been hooked up, and we had the sheep continued not to put pressure onto the fence through a hole. But electrifying the fence aids in keeping the predators out if they get close enough to touch it. So it's important, though, that the reason we deploy these techniques is profitability. We're getting paid on pounds of lamb or pounds of cattle brought to the corral. We have found that by utilizing night pens and non-lethal deterrents, we are bringing more pounds to the corral.
Hey,
I'm
Cameron,
having problems seeing the chat. So if someone has a question, can they help me, Seth, with monitoring that?
There's a question about how the frequency of the moving the pen.
Yeah, it's a great question. So we move the pen based on the soil terrain. This is working with our range con, identifying sites and soil conditions. We tend to find these clearings and landings, old logging landings, which is already disturbed soil sites inside the Forest Service. So there's very little concerned about that. We monitor for hoof health and animal wool health and just quality. If we get a lot of rainstorms, we might move these pens every night. If it's drier later in the summer season and the vegetated growth is holding up underneath the hooves because there's lots of cover, we might not have to move them at such higher frequency. So we monitor the ground and we monitor the disturbance of the soil. The second thing we do, and I notice there's a fair amount of agency folks on, is that we reseed these pen sites every fall right before the snow falls. So oftentimes we're seeking out soils that may be low in nutrients. We're going to concentrate the nutrients here. We're going to seed them with native grass for that ecological zone. And as anybody knows from moving to an old campsite, that's 2 or 3 days worth of feed next spring when we get back. And we're building up that organic matter in the soil by monitoring the encroachment of the species. We do not see, if you go into an annual grass zone, which was asked previously, and massively disturb this soil, that's a significant issue, which you need to address and be in communication with the ranger before that environment happens. So thanks for the question. I'm not sure who asked it. Was there anything else, Seth?
No, that was it. Thanks.
Perfect. You can see these on Google Earth. If you know where to look, the vegetation density on a poor ridge structure, these polygons show up pretty visible, depending on, at least from on Google Earth, if you know where to look. But when we talk about inventory management, I want to talk, it's important that we talk about, and profitability is really where it comes down to. So the question is how long we've been doing this and what's our effective rate. We've been night penning since 2010, so about 10 years now. We count the sheep every day. That's an important part of the night penning, inventory management to profitability. We night pen every single night. We are not in our lambing camp. And before we turn out on spring range, we deploy the night penning fence. I don't have a picture of it in the mixing pens and allow the lambs to touch it on their own accord. This really increases the longevity and effectiveness of your fence. Also, we have found that if you're going to start night pinning, it's best to do it with dry ewes in the fall and train them to going to the pen. Our sheep have done it for so long that they naturally seek the pens out every night. In the 10 years of night pinning, we've had 10 total nighttime kills. 13 total nighttime kills there. We early on, when we were novice at deploying the night pens, we had 6 lambs killed. Those lambs, as you can see in the notes there, were killed by coyotes in the spring range, and the lambs were left outside the pen. The herder was unable to catch them, and the lambs were found dead in the morning. The ewe, the only ewe we've ever had killed at night in the last 10 years, was killed by a bear. The wolves attacked the night pen. The herder responded. The sheep spooked. They blew out the backside of the night pen, so on the opposite side of the attack from the wolves, and ran into a bear. And one ewe was killed. That's bad luck, I guess. We've had 3 rams killed and 2 dogs. The 3 rams were killed in the daytime. The wolves, we found out afterwards from collared data, which I'll talk to here in a minute, which is important for both sheep and cattle producers. The wolves had stalked the sheep for about 12 days. The herders went to lunch, and the 3 rams were killed while the sheep were at the water hole shaded up in September. The 2 dog attacks, which is important, both attacks of those, wolves attacked the night pen, dogs sounded the alarm, herder responded and chased the wolves off. One dog in each occasion, so 2 different times, followed the wolves into the trees, and the herder can hear the fight. The dog later succumbed to his injuries or was killed in that fight. It was too much brush for the herder to respond in the middle of the night to get there. What's really important here is to look at the left-hand side here. This is an actual text message between Fernando and I. It started in the evening. He responded, that he needed help. He had counted the livestock at night, again with the night pen, when they were going in on their own, and some of his dogs. I said I'd bring another man up in the morning. I was going that way. It started at dusk, so like 6. The next night on your right-hand side, not the next night, about 20 minutes later, he had found the missing sheep, and he was trailing them back to his night pen. And if you read his text message there, there's a clear indication that he felt relieved that the night pens are taking the stress off my employees, which is allowing them to rest better and getting higher levels of performance in the field by taking care of the stock. Really important for me as a manager. And then we're going to talk profitability. Night pens are not expensive. The herder cost, if you're in a Western outfit, is fixed. You're paying that anyways. It takes 4 rolls for a band of sheep. Depending on how big your band is, you might be into it 5. 4 T-post, 1 charger. If you come down, the total cost of a night pen, last time I priced it out, was $1,100. You can do the math, how many lambs you need to save. And for me, it's based on my weaning weights, it's 7. At 7 lambs, I net a $76 profit. We were losing 7 lambs easily to coyote predation in the spring alone, not to mention summer predation to other predators. Night pens, hand down, have brought more lamb to the krill and increased my profitability. Being honest with all you guys, you're not my neighbors. When we look at margin and return, that's where I focus on. And so I'm sharing what we're doing as tools and techniques, but this is a distinct competitive advantage that I have on the landscape or have in my operational area. This is a new tool that we're looking at. This is a bark light. It's a small video. I'll deploy it here. It's in development. Bear with us on the video. So the bark light stays on for about a minute. It's activated by the dog barking. So wolves attack the herd. Guardian dog engages, gets nervous. He barks, which is normal behavior. The light goes off. It aids in the defense of the dog. We're working out development kinks. And with COVID, the research got slowed up a little bit. We're hoping to get back into it as soon as this summer and spring. Seth, was there another question?
Yeah, there sure was. So one question was, what is the loss ratio due to predation before fencing and after? Let's do that one first.
Yeah, so we were easily losing. I don't have it in a percent for you now, but we were in the spring when I started night penning. We were easily losing to coyotes, which was the predominant predator at the time, 2 lambs a week or more. And wildlife services in our area, due to our operational zone, we weren't getting the effectiveness that Grandpa got, and we were forced to deploy a new technique. Overnight, we eliminated nighttime predation on lambs, just that fast. So our current ratio of total stray and missing livestock, so dead by disease or natural causes, stray or missing livestock, at weaning this year was 1.4%. And we had 3 killed by predation. The rest were older ewes that passed away or sick lambs. We probably have cut our predation by, I would say, easily 7% over the course before the techniques to now. And that's an estimate. It may be more. One of the side effects to night penning, though, and I'm hoping to do some research on this, is we actually think due to, we don't have evidence on this, but our observation is that our weaning weights have actually increased in the 10 years that we've been doing this. And what we think is occurring is the stress hormone at night is reduced. So the animals are healthier or happier. And then when the herder opens the gate in the morning, we're getting a micro rumen floral response, sort of like a feed truck pulling down in a feed yard. We're getting that same rumen response by the gate getting open. And that's increasing our weaning weights. So our weaning weights have, between that and genetics, have increased 12 pounds in 10 years. So about a pound a year. We've kind of plateaued lately, but we have been seeing increased weaning weights as well.
Great, thanks. And then the other question is this pen something you're allowed to use on Forest Service land?
Yeah, so my Forest Service loves it. Prior to taking over this particular allotment, the ranger was getting calls from, you guys are familiar, Portland, Oregon, our metro area dominates our state's policies, which Denver is growing in your metro area. You're seeing it as well. Every time there was a wolf attack, there would be 100 calls into the ranger, into the Forest Service, from wolf advocate groups or people. And the ranger was getting tired of it. When we took over this allotment and deployed our techniques, his phone stopped ringing. When their time spent at managing decreases and their phone stopped ringing and the reports they're getting, we worked with Defenders of Wildlife or NGOs, is collaborative. The opportunities on the allotment increase or have increased for us. And so we've seen a very positive relationship between managing a diverse ecosystem with the Forest Service, which is one component of what we're doing by deploying these deterrents and reducing predation and reducing conflict between the producer public that usually flows through the Forest Service. So great questions. Thank you, Seth. We got a little bit of time here. I'm moving fairly fast because I really want to make sure we cover it. And if any extra time at the end, we'll definitely circle back to questions. The point is that each scenario, each landscape is different. There is challenges working with your management organizations, whether it's BLM or Forest Service. And it takes creativity and innovation to figure out the tools that you can deploy in your landscape that is the win scenario for all entities involved, all interest groups that are involved. And what has happened is the pack in our area the year before we went on was threatened to be eliminated. And that pack still exists today. And we have we've had the interactions we've had with them has been minimal. And so the advocacy groups, the wolf lover groups, and the producer groups, as well as our state agencies, we're all happy because we've reduced that conflict between the three groups. And the one thing, this is really important from a cattle and a sheep perspective, and this has been very successful in what we've been doing, is communication has to be precise. Early on when we were deploying our techniques and really managing to eliminate predations on the allotment, we went to and upgraded our communication. So all locations that we communicate with state agency, federal agencies is by GPS. And if you look at the middle screenshot, that is the GPS location of our main corral on our allotment. The second thing is your pictures need to be accurate and relevant. This ewe had a hole in her ear, which is what I'm trying to indicate by the pin going through the hole. On the right-hand side, this was the herder at daylight when he found the dead dog killed by wolves. Herder will send me whatever information he has, a GPS location and pictures of the attack. We have a communication channel that we immediately send those out to get the appropriate agencies to respond. This is important from a compensation standpoint. Oregon has predation compensation. Not also from a wildlife management standpoint, Oregon is still actively managing their wolf population, and our state agencies want accurate information, and they oftentimes will come out and inspect every predation that occurs. This summer, back to the percent, we had 1 dog, 1 and 2 ewes, 1 lamb and 1 ewe, 2 sheep, and both of those were killed, 1 by a bear, 1 by a cougar, and 1 by a wolf. That was all the predation we had all summer, and from August weaning to off date, which is 6 weeks, there was no predation. Predator management is 24/7, 365. This is really important that I reiterate this. As a sheep producer, we know this, but we look at the history of the cattle production. The last 50 years, we have operated very carefree. Our biggest complaint probably was a coyote maybe in the spring or a rogue black bear, but now with public policies and reintroduction of species, we have to start thinking about predator management all the time. And predator management starts in the off season by training your livestock, especially if you're in the cattle sector and going on to large allotments. It's really important that you focus into offside techniques to reduce your risk of predation in the summer. This is wolves are really important. Den, obviously, and there's few things that I kind of had a learning curve on. Den is where they have the pups in the spring, but then they'll always usually move them to like a high ridge. This site happens to be on our allotment. Every time we go to it, we run into troubles, except for this last year. When we went to the particular site, the camp that's next to it, we didn't have any trouble. And so either we're communicating with the wolves to leave us alone, or they're getting nervous about all our techniques. I'm not sure which one. Bone pile removal is extremely effective on the cattle sector. Wolves will find a bone pile. I do an analysis here in a minute. We'll talk about risk and reward. In Wallowa County, where our cattle are, there was high concentrations of wolves on the calving ground in the lower valley. And what they found was there was about a dozen bone piles that were attracting the wolves in, and then they were having predation on the calves. The county commissioners made it free to dump dead animals at the dump. And within a few weeks and the years preceding, that wolf pack has dispatched out of that area. And in the wintertime, their range has actually kind of shifted to where more of the elk are located. I talked about GPS collared information earlier about the polygons. From a management technique, it's really important that you get this in your head. This information is absolutely worthless. Absolutely worthless. It tells you where the wolf was, not where he's going or what he's going to do. The collars are massively unreliable as far as daily uploads, and the wolves move so much. I'll show you in a slide that just because they're in a region doesn't mean that they're going to do any problem or damage there. If you were a bank manager, picture if I walked in and told you I'm going to put a GPS tracker on every bank robber. That doesn't tell you when the robber is going to come to the bank and steal your money. It just tells you, it just allows us to find him once your money's gone. So, we look at the asset on the landscape, a band of sheep, easily 150, 200,000, depending on what your value is and numbers. It's a bank. It's a large asset, and we need to protect it with the same technology and resources that we can, or your money is going to be seeking out or leaking out the back door over the course of the season. Do not think GPS collared information is going to be helpful. And the reason is, hang on. So please don't go down that line of thinking. I fell for it early on, and I've taken my time to come back and say, no, that's worthless information. The one thing that's really important on this slide is our herders, and myself in particular, do not believe that wolves are random in their behavior. We believe on a micro landscape, there's repeat patterns. This year's predation, the wolf attack this year was within 36 hours of the same wolf attack last year. And that happens to be 36 hours after the start of archery season. So if we look inside our management landscapes and we start to recognize small patterns, we know there's higher risk. And as we look at margin and profitability, we know when and where we can deploy extra deterrence to try to mitigate that risk of predation. The other thing that's really important from a cattle standpoint is wolves can only kill or attack if the prey is running, which is really important if you are going to have cattle in a heavy predation area or heavy wolf concentrated area, is that you train your cattle not to run. And smell. This is back to the carcasses and just keeping your area clean. They have a massive brain dedicated to smell. And so everything you can do to communicate or to reduce your risk is important. And because so much of their brain is dedicated to smell, it's important that I state that one of the greatest deterrents we have is human presence. So I advocate that if you get out of the pickup to open a gate, to mark the post, to go to the bathroom on the post, if the cattle are in the pasture. And that sounds really kind of crude, but it's true. If we want wolves to know we are there, we have to tell them. And if we have to tell them that we're actively managing our livestock, whether it's sheep or cattle, then we need to mark our territory just like he does or they do. So scent and human scent and leaving human scent is an important way to deter predation and reduce the risk reward effect to the wolf as he's evaluating whether to attack or not. Seth, is there another question? You lit up green again.
Yeah, there sure is. There's a few actually. I don't know if you want to answer 3 or 4 questions now or wait.
I want to jump to the cattle thing and then follow up with questions, as I think it's really important that with our limited time that we get to some techniques for the cow guys.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay. This is the slide. 2 lines of known GPS data on our allotment. That red X is our crell of the distance a wolf traveled. 1 in the winter. This area we had 12 foot of snow up there last year at the crell site. So the wolf made it 13.5 miles in the winter, 14 miles in the summer on the yellow line. That blue dot is the location right here of the camp on that day when the wolf traveled. So he came pretty close, but we didn't have predation. That's back to the GPS collared information kind of being worthless. So this is where I talk about from the cattle standpoint, and my cattle management is a lot of common sense. I believe cattle are trainable. Those cattle producers in this group, I'm certain you know this. Every time it snows, whether my cows know exactly where we're going to feed them. Even if they're brand new to the pasture, they still know. The point is that we can train the cattle to behave in certain ways that reduces their risk of an attack. If you are in heavy predation areas and you know your risk is important, we want the cattle to group. And I would encourage you guys to look at your mineral and supplemental feed distributions at dusk instead of dawn. Look for defendable space when you put those out. And then consider training your cattle to come to that mineral area at night and using fox lights to deter the wolves from the area. The second thing is, from a cattle standpoint, it's sound animal husbandry. You need to have appropriate you need to remove sick animals promptly. You need to have good vaccine programs. Your micro and macronutrients need to be appropriate for your area. Deploying white salt over and over, I do not think, I think there's a correlation between mineral health of the animals and predation that is occurring. And that is simply by looking over the fence on our cattle that to our neighbors that have a higher predation and we don't have any. This is a risk of injury to the wolf. So this is the risk reward. So you need to evaluate, the wolf is constantly evaluating his risk of injury in the attack. They're not very good. They have to hemorrhage the animal with their jaws behind the flanks, which means they oftentimes get kicked. That's why so much of their brain is dedicated to smell. Finding the sick calf in the herd is a low risk of injury to the wolf, but it's a high reward for dinner. Versus a group of animals in a clearing that are used to having dogs around that turn and face the wolves. And this is work done by Hillary out of Montana. It's important that if the cow faces the wolf, the risk changes and his risk of injury is high. And the risk of reward, although is high, but we want him to pursue a different animal. My goal on cattle management relative to predators is simply not to eat mine. If they go to my neighbor and eat theirs, I'll be honest with you, I'm okay with it because I'm getting paid on pounds to the krill. So working with my cattle in the off season for appropriate dog behavior is one technique that we do. So when we get to our summer grasses and the vulnerability goes up, they're less likely to be predated on. The second thing is on the bottom here is time your calving to ungulates. If you're calving 60 days ahead of the elk in your area or the deer in your area, there's a natural shortage of food supply for the wolves. They're going to move towards the risk reward behavior of eating baby calves, increases your predation thing. We talked about fencing in the prescribed grazing section. We personally, this is my personal opinion, is that when there's lots of cross fencing, the risk of injury to the wolf increases by barbed wire snapping back, and they tend to move towards more open area or larger pastures to prey on. I'm going to skip here and go straight to this risk assessment, which I really would hope that from a cattle standpoint, you would capture this screen. What I did for my own outfit is we break the 4 seasons into vulnerability, predator of concern, and risk of attack. The next couple slides here are if we turned everything on to high. So if we had wolves in every single event, calving, weaning, dry cows, fall. And the first question you have to ask yourself is, what is your economical acceptable level of loss? And then you need to look at some questions like calving, like when are you calving? We talked about pairing it with ungulates. Can you bring them closer to humans as possible? Or can you put human presence in your calving pasture? You know, a cow herder may be an option. Is fladry an option? They use a lot of this up in Montana by actually physically fencing the entire pasture with fladry. Can you deploy fox lights in your corners? Is there a corridor or approach that you tend to see more risk into a certain valley or canyon that you might be able to put some more presence of deterrence in that area? When are you feeding the cattle? Is it at dawn or dusk? And have you tried sentry animals, guard dogs or burros? We run a burro with our yearlings. They stay in wolf country all the time. We have not lost one in the 4 years we've had him. Our neighbors, heifers, have been hit 6 times. So we have to train the animals to the burro, but we believe that he provides a high level of sentry effect to keep the animal grouped up, and that's observed during his behavior. Second thing, let's go to the summer. Can you deploy range riders? When is your attacks occurring? We know when stress level increases in livestock, that's a higher reward to the wolf. So if you are trailing or trucking your animals, is there an opportunity to actually night pin them to reduce their risk of attack for, say, a few days before you turn on to maybe a larger open allotment? Can you increase your stock density, cross fencing, working with your landowners? Again, hormone response is important, right? A mother cow protecting her calf is a good hormone response, changes the risk reward for the wolves. If you're having yearlings, have you thought about running some old cows with them just to encourage that hormone response to defend your ground and not fight or flight that typically comes from yearling cattle? If we move into dry cows in the fall, you know, this comes back to stock densities, hormone response, and then what I like to refer to as the hunting season effect on risk and reward. So after weaning calves, it's a high vulnerability when her hormones are adjusting. And something that you got to be really paying attention to when she's maybe looking for her calf, she's tight bagged, might need to deploy extra deterrence or change the way you wean, utilize some fencing in that particular temporary fencing to reduce your risk of reward. And then what we see is hunting season effect. Once the gut piles start hitting the ground, our risk on both classification of stock, sheep and cattle, drastically reduce. We can pull in some resources, financial resources at that time and save a little money when our risk of attack is reduced. So it's managing the limited resource of labor and capital to the highest times of predicted predation. I'm not on every landscape every single moment of the day. Like I said, it's 24 hours a day. So this is my core values, is to train my personnel on how to utilize the techniques in mythology and win, trust them to implement it correctly, and then show them and reward them for their willingness to engage in non-lethal tools and methods. So that's really important to me for the herders and for those individuals working with the cattle in the summer. This is my contact information. My friend Shane Stevenson and I, he's been utilizing some non-lethal deterrents around increasing game bird and large animal ungulates on some of the ground he works on. And then obviously for myself, working with sheep and cattle. With that, I notice we're respecting everyone's time, Seth. I'm going to exit my screen here and try to go to the chat, and we'll start answering some questions.
Great, sounds good. Thank you. So I guess maybe the first question, do your guard dogs have spike protective collars?
No, if the wolf's that close, the dog's dead. And to be real honest with you, people honest to the group, the dogs are a tool. It's just like a hammer in the toolbox. Sometimes you break your hammer, and what do you have to do? You got to replace it. Sometimes the dogs die. I don't get paid on pounds of dogs weaned. I get paid on pounds of lamb. So we actively monitor our genetic streams in our dogs, raise our own guard dogs every year, and then remove the ones that aren't doing their jobs. But do not get hung up on the fact or this when you deal with agencies or off city folk, they oftentimes I get the response, "Oh, your poor dog died." No, it's just a tool in the toolbox. It broke. We're going to replace it with a new one. Good question.
What options do you have when you have a LPD or sheep killed by a wolf? Does Wildlife Services have the option to eliminate the wolf? And is the compensation program fair, and what are the verification steps?
Yeah, there's lots of work right now by Landowners Alliance around compensation and some programs coming out to talk about fairness. In our area, each compensation program is handled by our county commissioners, so it varies by county. Are they fair? They're using market value for your loss. Specifically dealing to the predation event, we have a wolf management policy that the state of Oregon abides by. It takes more than one event. You have to prove that you're utilizing non-lethals to get to a lethal removal of the wolf pack. They do it. What happens is there's massive public outcry, and the agency folks do not like to do it. They're more willing to work with you on preventative tools than having to move to a lethal measure. My personal opinion, we want to train our wolf pack just like we train our stock dogs. We want them to know we're present on the landscape and to stay the hell away from us. And if we go out and eliminate the pack, that changes pack dynamics and allows for a new wolf to move in. Migrating wolves, straying wolves, or territorial wolves are a greater risk than a known pack that has a known denning site, a known rendezvous site. We can manage around those tools and techniques on our allotment. Good question. Thanks. What's next, Seth?
Let's see.
How do you train the cattle not to run? That's an excellent question, George. Just get rid of their legs, I guess. That's I don't know. You work with them hard. Hillary does a lot of work up with her work in Montana with your stock dogs. If you're trailing cattle down the road and a cow breaks off and you send a dog out and she runs back to the herd, if your historic things would, the dog might chase that cow all the way back to the bunch, in which case you would get 3 cows turn around and go give that big old, and we've all heard of that, look at the dog and blow a little snot. And then you'd call your dog off. Her behavior to go back to the herd needs to be rewarded. So you need to, it's okay to use your dog. When she faces the dog, put a little pressure on her to go back to the herd. But as soon as she breaks to go to the herd, you got to pull your dog off. You need to reward that animal to stay in a herd in a group, especially if you're going to be on open range or heavy timbered allotments throughout the summer. And the second thing is handling your stock needs to be calm. That's like back to, I said, into the management techniques. If you're trail your livestock at a dead run the whole time, that is not going to be successful. If every time a stress hormone, we are prey animals as humans, generates a run response in the animal, then you're not successfully training them not to run.
There are a few comments in there that folks can read. If anybody has any questions, we have 5 minutes until the end of the program.
Yeah, we run marker lambs too. That's a good question. We run a few blacks with the sheep. If that's your inventory management strategy is at that level, that's great. We're looking at actually moving to ultra high frequency ear tags. And we want the count down to be down ±1, not plus or minus a couple hundred. So it's your level of acceptance of economical loss. And for me personally, the pins allow us to count every day or to count multiple times a day. And so we push for knowing our inventory every day to reduce stray and missing livestock, which are the -- preyed on animal. Have you had the same success with lions? Yeah, lions are tricky animals. They're ambush predators. Every lion attack we've had, it's in the daytime, like he jumps out of a tree or something. That's where you got to have the sentry animals on your guard dogs. You want a few guard dogs that bounce around or are a little bit farther out from the herd. They're really effective to displace lions and bears. Our strategy is we're going to be in the area maybe 7 days at max, depending on the forage. We want to just to notify the predators we're here. That's where the guard dogs come in and symbiotically stay in the area. And then as we move on, their home range for that lion and bear maintains in its appropriate place. Yeah, I think bells are a great thing. You know, there's a lot of theory. There's 2 sides to bells on cattle. One is this idea that it's ringing the dinner bell for the wolves. The other idea is that it is a deterrent on the landscape. I think that's personal preference on which one you use. I don't have an opinion either way on what you do for belling the cattle. We bell the sheep. It's a management technique, not a deterrent technique. What has wolf presence in your area done to wildlife numbers? Actually, if you look at Idaho, they have some really good data on, they have an avid hunting season, hunters organization, diverse wolf population. I'm not an expert on their data, but their tagged fill rate is actually increased, which is really important. And when I said in the opening slide, I want a balanced ecosystem, right? We can look at the greater Yellowstone example of wolves displacing the elk and willows coming back to the riparian areas. We look at the grazing scenario earlier. I want to leave the landscape in a more ecologically stable environment. Wolves play a part in managing that environment. So the goal then is just not to have them mess with me. And I mentioned that this is profitability driven and competitiveness towards my neighbors. If my neighbor is having wolf predations and I'm not, it's a competitive environment out there. And the last thing that this is also gives me is it gives me a competitive edge on leases. There are a larger number of absentee landowners in our operating range, thus not born, inherited it, live in metropolitan areas. And they want to know that we're deploying these techniques. And we've secured leases because we're able to package and sell our techniques to a healthy ecosystem. Yeah, UHF is awesome. The apparel industry has some great tools. The technology is cheap. I have only used RFID tags to date. Obviously, tag interference is the problem. What I hope to do, I'd love to get some money and resources to UHF tagging and tools and techniques for implementing, especially around reducing stray and missing livestock on the landscape.
Well, to respect everybody's time, I think we're going to end right on time. So thank you so much, Cameron, for giving us a very informative presentation. It was good timing and well received. So thank you.
Thank you, Seth. And then if information was on the last slide, if you guys got follow-up questions, reach out to Seth and your local extensions agents. I've spoke to them before. And then the last point I'll leave with the group today is, the tools of tomorrow have not been created yet. And I'm a firm believer that what we're going to utilize to protect our livestock on the landscape in the next 10 years or in the next 10 minutes is sitting somewhere in our head. And it's just a matter of trying it, being a little silly, and then seeing what the results were. So thank you guys, and good luck with your reintroduction and migration of wolves into Colorado.
Excellent, thanks. And thanks to everybody for joining. Thanks to our previous presenters. We're recording this and we will send this out next week at some point. So thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your day.